Now, this is some information on how to stretch watercolor paper the old-fashioned way with some gum tape and a wooden board. Now, the first thing you need to remember to do is mark off where your tape is going to go along the edge of your paper. I always forget this stage, so I forgot it this time. I had to go back and do it again. I use about 3/8 of an inch, which is almost exactly a centimeter. You can use imperial or metric, whichever you like, but about that amount. What you really need to do is make sure it's a nice straight line, so everything in your paper on the edge is straight. And I just mark off with some little check marks. Don't draw big dark lines around your paper. You don't need to do that. Just a guideline where your gummed tape is going to go. And I'm showing you here on some of my medium quality paper, but when we do the project, I'm going to use Arches 140-pound cold press paper. So I'm just showing you on this little demonstration that 3/8 of an inch is almost exactly the same as 1 centimeter. And it's not critical. You can do a 1/2 inch, it doesn't matter. Don't do less than this because that is not enough paper for the tape to cling to. It needs to have a reasonable amount of paper to cling on to when the paper shrinks. Now, the idea, of course, is to wet your watercolor paper on both sides with cold water. Please use cold water. Watercolor paper has sizing on it and often inserted into the making process, and hot water will dissolve this sizing. It's like a gelatin sort of sizing. Now, this is the gummed tape that I like to use. I bought it many years ago in a huge roll. It's going to last me a lifetime and I'll still have leftovers. It is just brown paper tape and it has glue on one side that you wet to activate. Now, one thing I suggest is you get all of your tape ready when your table and your hands are dry. Now, I lost a whole roll of this tape because I didn't do this in the past. I handled it with wet hands and I got water on it accidentally, and once you get water on the edge of this tape, it's ruined. It goes through the whole roll, it gums everything together, you can't get it apart. The only place I put water before I put the tape away is on this one little edge, and that helps keep the tape closed. I just glue it on that one edge there and then put it in a plastic bag and remove it, because no matter how careful you are, you're going to splash water on that tape and it will be ruined. So now there's 2 methods to wetting the paper. This first method is to use a big soft brush and some cold water and wet both sides of the paper liberally so that you get plenty of water on there to soak in. And I found when I used this brush there was hair and dust all over it, so make sure your brush is really clean. I removed that later. I actually went and did my favorite method when you weren't watching, which is to take my piece of paper into the bathtub, turn on the cold tap and run cold water on both sides of the paper, and then just shake off the drips and put it back on the wooden board. You need to leave it for about 10 minutes when it's on the wooden board for all the water to soak in, for the paper to absorb the water and start to settle down, and then you can come back, flatten out your paper and put your gummed tape on it. But it needs to be really good and wet. So this is the piece that I forgot to put the marks on the edge, which is something I always do. I never learn. So I'm putting them on the board so that I can get my tape nice and straight. I really just don't like it when my tape isn't straight. It throws off your whole picture. It throws off your horizon line. It will mess up your framing. I like things straight. So here I've put my 3/8 along the edge and I get my tape that I've pre-cut, remember? And this is the best method I've found. You get a wet sponge, squeeze out a bit of the water, and then just run it along the tape. Don't put too much water on the tape because it will completely dissolve the glue and rub it all off and it won't glue properly to your paper. And then line it up on your little pencil marks and smooth it down carefully. And you do this all the way around. And before you do that, you make sure that your paper, you can lift your paper up and get it nice and flat. And another thing you really should have is an unfinished smooth wooden board. And quite a thick board. If your board is too thin, the paper will shrink and pull up the board into a curve, and that won't be good for painting on. This board is about 3/4 of an inch thick, nice and smooth, so I don't have any trouble drawing or painting on it, and unfinished, so that the tape glues to it nice and firmly. And also when you're painting and you're doing a nice wash, the water will absorb into the unfinished wood and it won't bubble up underneath. If you have a painting board or a varnish board, the water from your wash will bubble up underneath your paper, and then your paper will bubble up and it will be very annoying. Plus, that added to that, the tape often doesn't stick and it will peel off of the paint or the varnish. So if you do have a varnish or painted piece of wood, maybe you could just sand it down and use that. So I'm going to do the side pieces of tape now and gumming those down. I have to say I'm lazy and I don't do this very often because it takes time and effort. I usually just use masking tape. But this time when I painted on this beautiful flat stretched paper, it was such a joy. Just so wonderful to have flat paper that doesn't move. So I highly recommend this method. Some people will staple the paper down. I find my wrist can't handle all the stapling, and of course the staples have to all be pulled out of your board every time. A lot of work. I like this. It's just neater. And I will show you at the end of the video how I just cut the tape off of the board with a craft knife. Now I add masking tape, nice wide masking tape, over the top of the tape because this paper tape will get wet and pull up if you are doing lots of washes, and this helps to protect the tape and give you a nice edge to your paper if you're framing and you want a nice clean edge to your paper. The advice from many artists is to use a neutral color tape rather than blue or green. I never fuss. I mean, I don't feel my paintings are that worth that much to fuss over, but apparently it's good to have a nice neutral color so you can judge your color mixing better. And I've made about 1/4 of an inch border with my masking tape, which stayed down beautifully, which gave me a lovely clean edge to my painting. So I will show you how to remove that, and then good luck.